Hello, Cat fans. I'm back to do a recap of the week that was, and the Cats defeating the Edmonton Eskimos 25-24 with a great comeback in the fourth quarter. Ends the week on a very high note. And I also wanted to wait until the Toronto Argos Montreal Alouettes game had happened because, of course, the fates of these three teams are very intertwined. One will be the second seed in the East, likelihood and host a playoff game against a Western team, and the other two will likely be out of the playoffs just because of how the Eastern Conference is right now. So being able to comment on how the Owls did against the Argos is very key. But let's focus on the Cats for the time being. If you take away the second quarter, it was a pretty dominant display against the Edmonton Eskimos. Eskimos had 3 touchdowns in the second quarter, scored all 24 of their points, so we need to look at that as a failure, obviously, but we made good adjustments in the second half, came back with 15 points there for 10 in the first quarter, and picked up the 25-24 win. Jeremiah Masoli leading the way on offense, but still 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions, so there are some definite problems there, and it's feeding the anti-Masoli Flames that he, despite throwing for over 400 yards, 419 yards on 27 of 44 passing, will be probably blamed for this game being so close. And there's some justification to that. I think that the offensive scheme towards the red zone has not been great. I think the ability to finish drives has not been great. I think some of that does go on the quarterback, but I think some of that play selection, if we're being honest. In the rushing game, Alex Green had a fantastic game. Pick up 19 carries, 104 yards and a touchdown. Keep in mind, I think the big deal here is that we did not give up on the run game, even when behind 24-10. I think it's a big deal is that I think the Cats, kind of unlike in the Ken Austin era where we just didn't run the ball at all, have been way willing to give up on the run game when we fall behind and focus on put all the weight on Masoli's shoulders to try to make him deliver. It's not a fair way to run the offense. And of course, I've talked about in the past, I don't really like how Jerry Glanville runs the defense, but it did work today, although Mario Cooper was burned on a couple of big plays by the Edmonton Eskimos, and it looks like he was replaced by Josh Johnson during the game, so that helps a lot in that regard. Through the air, Luke Tasker, who's been a bit MIA pretty much all season long, just really hasn't had the big games. 9 catches, 156 yards, and a touchdown. Big game from Luke Tasker. Welcome back to the lineup. You have been gone for a while, and we have missed you. That being said, only his second over 100-yard game of the season. We're talking about a guy whose second best game up to this point was 6 catches for 71 yards. So hopefully this is a return to what Luke Tasker has done in the past. And we can rely on him to possibly pick up, be 1,000-yard receiver Luke Tasker. I mean, we're talking about a guy who has gone over 1,000 yards just once or twice in his career, including last season. Probably would have done it in 2016 and also 2014 had he been healthy the whole season. So, he's a guy who it is very key to get going. And he's been a little bit MIA in the offense up to this point. But that has been made up by the fact that Brandon Banks has been massive, Jalen Saunders has been massive, so it's great to see him stepping up in the absence of Saunders, and when Brandon Banks is held to a pretty pedestrian 3 catches yards. Mike Jones also, I believe, had his first 100-yard receiving game as a CFL player. 4 catches for 117, greatly influenced by a 50-yard catch that he had, but still a very solid outing for the Canadian receiver who's under a little bit of pressure right now to perform starting role. He responded to that. Terrence Tolliver also had 3 catches for 52 yards, and I continue to be pretty underwhelmed by Chris Williams, who had 3 catches for 33 yards. And again, this goes back to, unfortunately, I'm going to have to harp on the Manziel trade a lot, is that Chris Williams was a centerpiece of that deal. And in 4 games for the Cats, he has 10 catches for 114 yards. It's not a great pickup. He's not electrifying the world on returns either. And the return game right now is very crowded because, of course, when Frankie Williams returns from injury, you're going to have Frankie Williams. You got Brandon Banks, who you like to mix in a little bit. And you have Mercer Timmons and Sean Thomas Erlington, who are handling kickoff duties. So, I still don't like the trade. Jamal Westerman, of course, the other big part of that. These draft picks really have to pan out for this to have been worth it. But speaking of the defense, great to see the defense get some pressure on the quarterback and get 3 sacks. Simone Lawrence with 1, Don Unamba with 1, and Ted Laurent with 1. But you'll note that those are not coming for the defensive end spots, which continues to be a concern. Pressure. Additionally, that being said, Glanville did bring some additional pressure to this game finally and got some sacks that way. So I hope that this leads to a more blitz-happy, more aggressive defense after a while. But with Richard Leonard down, of course, the secondary is a little bit weak. And I was talking to this with my cousin Kevin about the Ticats secondary, and I think it's a very good when it's healthy. When you have Roll, Bro, Leonard, Brooks, Daly there. But the backups are not terribly solid. We saw Mario Cooper get a little victimized here. We'll see what Josh Johnson fits in there. And, of course, Courtney Stephen seems to be very much the forgotten man. And one that I would think that is there no trade bait for Courtney Stephen, who's been a very good player, just one that we don't seem to really have a role for right now. It's a bit weird to think of like Courtney Stephen is special teams leader, and that's kind of all he really is right now. Very weird. Very weird to think about that. Still, defense was led by Simone Lawrence with 4 tackles. No particularly outstanding individual efforts, just a good job of keeping it down to scoreless in 3 quarters of the game. On the Edmonton side, Mike Riley was a pretty pedestrian 15 of 25 for 250 yards, but with 3 touchdowns all in the second quarter. CJ Gable did victimize the Cats pretty heavily with a 61-yard run, but otherwise was kept in relative check. 7 carries for 20 yards outside of that for 81 catches for 35 yards. Still some problems with, of course, Duke Williams. 3 catches, 116, 61 yards, and long and a touchdown. Darrell Walker was held to 4 catches, 9 yards, but 2 of those were touchdowns. So it's a mixed bag, but I think a big comeback win is something that the Tiger Cats have historically not been able to do during the June Jones era. The adjustments at halftime have been a constant complaint of Ticat fans and pointed out by analysts and experts. So to have this go this way, have them win the game and come from behind is a huge deal. And probably the biggest moment of the season, really. It also gives us 2 wins over the Edmonton Eskimos, which is not shabby. We consider that is the second best team in the league. We're now 4-5. You have to think that our record should be better than that, but you have to deal with that it's not. We're 2 games behind Ottawa, even with the Toronto Argos, and of course ahead of the 2-8 Montreal Alouettes. We need to pick up the pace a little bit more. And to be honest, if the Argos and Ticats can get their stuff together, we could, I think, see a 3-team Eastern playoff game. I mean, keep in mind that 4th place in the West is Saskatchewan right now, and it just 4. They're at the same number of wins as the Ticats, just 1 more than the Argos. Granted, they have a game in hand. They're playing the BC Lions tonight at 10 p.m. So if that game goes their favor, then it looks a bit worse. But, I think the Argos and Ticats are good enough that we could see the All-Eastern playoff here. I think the top 3 teams in the league are in the West, but I don't really rate the Riders or Lions that highly as unstoppable forces. So we'll see how that pans out. And then, of course, we're going to go to the other side of the Manziel trade, which was the Montreal game against the Argonauts. The Alouettes winning 25-22 with quarterback Antonio Pipkin as their starting quarterback. He went 22 of 32 for 303 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. Solid outing. I tip my hat to you, McLeod Bethel Thompson, who is the Argos kind of heir apparent to Ricky Ray. 26 of 37 for 296 yards and 1 touchdown. I think Ticat fans who have been constantly harping on that Jeremiah Masoli is not a starting caliber quarterback in the league have to look at this game and realize that that is a starting caliber quarterback in most people's opinions in McLeod Bethel Thompson. Greatly outperformed by Jeremiah Masoli. Granted, it's 1 game. There will be better times, but that, there are teams that have worse quarterbacking situations than us. We should probably show Jeremiah Masoli a bit more love than we currently do. I think that this is also a big deal because, of course, the Alouettes won without Johnny Manziel. And I think the fact that McLeod Bethel Thompson losing is also a big thing that I've been kind of trying to get at all season long, and that is this idea that Johnny Manziel is a silver bullet, or that a quarterback is a silver bullet in general, it's just not really there. It's not really a true statement. I think it's a team game. You got to work on it. The quarterback is incredibly important, but I think there's this misconception about how we think of things. We we believe the hype, a lot of CFL fans. And we talk about Manziel coming up here and he's going to reinvent things. And there were people who talked about McLeod, Bethel Thompson. Okay, now the Argos are like this unstoppable force. And they go out and they lose to Montreal. A Manziel-less Montreal team, which, by the way, still hasn't won with Johnny Manziel. So, yeah. I don't know. Just look deeper than what you're simply hearing from the CFL panelists like, Jock Climby, Matt Dunnigan, etc. Because I think quite often they're going after a narrative that's not necessarily true. I mean, we see it a lot with the Manziel thing, the constant comparisons to Doug Flutie, and the avoidance of comparing him to other people with a great deal of similarities with him, former NFL players, Heisman Trophy winners, quarterbacks who were very athletic, Eric Crouch, Troy Smith, and their failures. And that, I think, is the key here, is to look at both sides of the coin and not assume things that have just not at any point been proven. There's a reason that there are draft busts in every sport on the planet, and that is because we still don't know how necessarily to quantify talent from the NCAA or college ranks and bring it into professional sports. It's just we don't have a 100% success rate. We do have a lot of it, but we don't have the 100% success rate. So this idea that Manziel is going to be the answer in Montreal, I still don't believe it. I still don't. And people are going to say I'm a Manziel hater and whatever. Maybe I am, but I think the numbers are pretty consistently backing me up here. Anyways, the Ticats with the victory. It's a big deal. We head on to next week as we approach that halfway point in the season. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Labor Day next week. Monday, September 3rd at 6:30 Eastern Time. It will be the Argos at the Ticats. This is a monumentally important game. If the Cats can win and even up their record at 5-5, it's a huge deal. And also important, you got to keep that win away from the Toronto Argonauts, who I've been talking very highly about the Argos throughout this video. I mean, they just lost to Montreal, so I mean there are certain problems obviously with their system still, and it's far from perfect, but there are some building blocks there. I think they have a good quarterback if they can settle in. They have James Wilder Jr., who I think is one of the most electrifying offensive players in the league right now. But they don't have a lot else, to be honest. They do have Armonte Edwards. We'll get that right, but there hasn't been a lot of step up elsewhere. Yeah, they have S.J. Green, but I do believe S.J. Green's best time is probably behind. Though he's been pretty good this season, wrapping up 41 catches for 472 yards. Of course, 1,000 last season proved that he wasn't. In fact, actually had his best season last season, breaking the 100 reception mark. Still very dangerous, but aging. You never know what you're going to get with the age. Professional athletes in football particularly burn out pretty quickly, and S.J. Green is at that point. So I'm looking forward to this game. I'm hoping the Ticats are healthy for this game because it is amazing. It is an amazingly important game. Let me just pull up the injured reserve right now to see how we're looking heading into the game as of, we're more than a week out, but let's have a look. So on the injured reserve right now, you have the following players: Jackson Bennett, which is a shame that he keeps going on the DL. I think he's a very Richard Leonard, Connor McGough, and Frankie Williams, or Goff and Frankie Williams, pretty big parts of the team, and of course the major injuries to Shamad Chambers, Brett Golding, John Green, Nick Shortle, and Justin Vaughn, who I think we are actually missing a lot more in the middle than. But reasonably healthy. Hopefully Leonard can be back in the lineup because, like I was saying, the secondary is not necessarily the deepest aspect of this team. Hopefully we can bring some blitzes, put some pressure on McLeod, Bethel Thompson. Hopefully we can evolve the running game, spread the ball out, and have some big plays from the likes of Brandon Banks, Luke Tasker, Chris Williams. Chris Williams is due for a breakout game to make me shut up at some point. Maybe Labor Day will be that day. Anyways, I will talk to you guys after Labor Day, and of course, Go Cats, go. We continue to hopefully lock down a playoff spot in the Eastern Division.